Hello, it is a pleasure to be with you in this space. I am Jim Elizondo from Real Wealth Ranching, where our goal is to help you achieve the highest productivity grazing your livestock while you improve your land the fastest with them. And today I would like to tell you about my personal journey on grazing. Since I was 12 years old, I have been fascinated by living things and God's creation, starting my own vegetable garden and rabbits back then. I even learned to make my own compost with the rabbit poop and use it on my vegetables. My parents also had 1 acre of grass in the house that I had to mow with a hand-powered mower machine, the ones that you push. So I was very much aware of how grass grew. My father and my grandfather and all my uncles and aunt had ranches with beef cows, and for me, that was love at first sight. I wanted to be a livestock rancher, so I was sent to college to become an agronomy engineer, and I graduated in 1984. And people may think that at university, you're going to get the best and latest knowledge on the subject you're studying, right? After all, it is quite an investment. But the truth is that after those 4 years it took me to graduate, I didn't know that I didn't know many things. I realized that I had been trained on conventional extractive agriculture, and it did not fit with what I had learned all my life with my vegetable patch, my rabbits, and observing nature. And I soon learned that I was not helping the land. Finally, in 1991, I was able to purchase a very degraded grass farm that had been in rice and export vegetables, tomatoes and bell peppers, and I immediately started with cattle, as that is what I love to do. Manage the land with cattle, as my family had done for generations. That is when I started learning in the real world, making economic decisions, and found that grazing management was of the largest importance to improve the land that had been degraded from years of conventional management, the farm that I had bought. And I had been reading books to learn better grazing management. Grass Productivity by André Bossan stands out as one of the most influential ones at the time. He wrote his 4 universal laws of grazing, and that made sense to me. He wrote about how grass roots will get short if we did not allow enough recovery time between grazing events. And he was well ahead of his time, as he wrote it back in the 60s. So when I started my own farm, I did what everyone did. Mostly continuous grazing with some rotation. But this didn't help the land, although the livestock did well, but at a low stocking rate compared to potential. So I started using electric fences to try and give rest to my grass. I got up to 7 steers per hectare stocking rate in the growing season, but without the best daily gains. I was growing stockers at that time. Later, I read Holistic Resource Management book by Alan Savory. And let me tell you, I had to read that book so many times as the content was not easy for me to understand. And finally, it did not make sense on the grazing part, as how could leaving 70% of the grass unharvested improve the soil? You see, my high-fiber tropical grasses, mostly Bermuda grass and others, did not stay trampled after grazing like cool season grasses do, but they spring back up immediately, creating a thatch that inhibited regrowth from lack of sunlight in the growing points. And as I had learned from Bossan, selective grazing meant untoward acceleration or weakening the roots by giving too short recovery periods whenever there was a short or long-term drought. Of course, there were ample plans on this stocking in the Holistic Management book, but that did not fit with my need of creating a herd with much better genetics if I was going to be forced to sell them every time there was a drought. No, there had to be a better way. What I did like on the grazing part from that book by Savory was the definition of overgrazing. He defined it as grazing a plant before it fully recovered from a previous grazing. This was very important to me, but did not fit with the rest of the grazing part of that book, which was contradictory to me. So I was still looking for answers for my pressing questions. A book from New Zealand, written in the 60s, From Grass to Milk, by McKinnon, explained how the number of productive animals kept at a low cost determines profits on a farm, and that made economic sense. So I started maintaining the highest stocking rate possible without losing animal performance, and this helped me in a big way to improve my profits. Now, I was looking for a way to achieve a high stocking rate with productive animals, but without creating overgrazing or weakening the roots of my grass. Now I am going to tell you about my largest wreck. I looked for help on this and found a consultant that promoted grazing the grass down so that the green leaf to stem ratio was improved in the regrowth. But he advised me to graze frequently, saying that the roots would somehow grow deeper doing this. This did not make sense to me, but I did it as he was my consultant, and he promised that it would somehow function. And he had done it before on a small farm. Well, it worked for a few months, taking it down and coming back fast to keep the quality high. It worked for a few months in the green season when I had good rain, and I greatly increased my stocking rate as he advised, to more than double and triple. But the roots of my grass were finally weakened by this frequent and close grazing to where the grass started growing very slow from short roots and lack of energy reserves. So there I was, with a very high stocking rate and little grass to feed my livestock that were losing weight. And remember, livestock in good body condition are needed to make a profit for your family. I felt devastated, having a high number of thin livestock and nothing to show for my efforts. I had to sell many to be able to profit from the rest, precisely what I didn't want to do. Has this happened to you? Have you been in a wreck caused by mismanagement? I promised to myself that I would never allow myself to be misled by the wrong advice of a consultant that didn't have his own economically successful farm. And this consultant was a professor in a prestigious college, but he didn't have his own farm, which meant it was more theory than practice. As more failures from different farms that had been following his advice were known, I started to feel better, but at first I felt very stupid. I well remember that. But I knew there must be a better way, as nature was bountiful on its own from my observations, my lifelong observations. So next, I went to all the conferences I could of the Stockman Grass Farmer when Alan Nature was their editor. He even came to my farm and gave a talk at the local university, and I really enjoyed those conferences of the Stockman Grass Farmers. In those conferences, in different U.S. cities and ranches, I was exposed to selective rotational grazing, which now has many names. And this sounded good in theory, but I had learned something very important from my previous consultant, the college professor, remember? The importance of the green leaf to stem ratio. As he had us cut a square yard of grass flush to the ground with scissors and weighed it. Then put it on a table to separate by hand all the green leaves from the stem material and weighed it to obtain what percentage was made of green leaf and what percentage were stems. He had explained that green leaves produce energy by photosynthesis and stems consume energy by respiring. And that reminded me of what I had learned in biology class biology class, so it was easy to understand. Now let's go back to rotational selective grazing. I was exposed to this method of selective rotational grazing where the livestock were allowed to consume the best and reject the rest. And this sounded great from the livestock point of view. Yes, there was the answer. And as I was being mentored by Mark Bader of Free Choice Enterprises on ruminant nutrition, I knew that livestock did better on leafy pastures because leaves are higher in digestibility than stems. But then I remembered the importance of the green leaf to stem ratio in the energy balance of the plant and the regrowth and soil's health. And I had serious doubts about selective grazing, which would leave large amounts of stem after grazing attached to the plant. Stems that would be consuming energy from the plant roots and crowns. Plus, I am good at math, and I did my own calculations of what selective grazing meant to the recovery period. You see, the more selective the grazing is, the faster the herd or flock returns to regraze a given paddock or pasture, which means a shorter recovery period. This went against growing strong roots and against plant energy reserves. Plus, I love to observe my livestock graze, and I observed that they do not graze like a mower where you can adjust the height of the residual. Livestock graze selecting the best plants down to the ground if allowed to, and rejecting the less desirable plants. And let me tell you something before I continue. If you're doing any type of controlled grazing, be it selective or not, you have already started to improve your land. You see, the worst grazing management that can be done anywhere is set stocking or leaving your livestock in a field for a long time, weeks or months, and then they will continually weaken the roots of the grass by consuming the regrowth as soon as they can graze it after the grass starts growing, depleting the plant's energy reserves. It is only a matter of fine-tuning your grazing management to greatly improve your productivity and your soil. So I continued experimenting, doing trials, and looking for answers to my questions now worldwide. Has this happened to you? That you know there must be something out there that keeps eluding you? I knew there was a better way. The huge wild herds of herbivores in Africa were doing it and having success without any synthetic fertilizer. So I kept searching and asking questions. By then, with the help of the internet, I started to get more answers. Some were good, some bad. Some I had already tried with not so good results, and some I did a trial and found out they were not correct. Do you want to know what has been the greatest mistake in grazing management all these years? Viewing grazing as an isolated event, not being able to visualize how daily grazing decisions impact the whole years and multi-years. It is a continuum, my friends. It's not an isolated event. Every decision we make has a consequence. So I found Johan Sitzman from Africa on the internet as he was offering his services as a consultant and he was selling his course, a face-to-face course. So I emailed him and he proposed something different. Take the grass down like the college professor had advised me to do, but instead of giving very short recovery periods, give very long recovery periods and to stockpile in area instead of calling the rejected grass leftovers as stockpile. So this made much sense to me. And I was in the worst drought in the last 60 years at the time. I started doing a trial on my two ranches at the same time as his advice sounded sound or correct. At first, I had serious misgivings. What if my livestock lost body condition? What if I damaged the soil? What if my grass died because of lack of soil armor, as the selective rotational grazing experts called it? I drove every day from one farm to the other, an hour and a half away, to see and observe the grass and my cattle gut feel and body condition. And remember, this was the worst drought in the past 60 years at the moment, so I was very stressed. No hay was available, not even Milo stocks were available. I had to make this new idea work, and it did work. My cattle required a minimal amount of a high-protein supplement to maintain body weight while consuming oat and dry grass, as that was all that was available to them. But I was able to go through that very difficult year with a stocking rate double than the norm. Then, Fitzman explained how body condition on livestock is determined by genetics and is highly heritable. This opened the door to my continued interest in adapted genetics to better manage the land on which livestock graze. Since then, I have been able to gain years of experience on the grazing program, the adapted genetics part, and putting it all together to make a better whole, which also includes wildlife and economic success with less labor. Many of my students are having success in all different environments around the world. I would like to invite you to a class on this type of grazing program, a free class that includes every day of the year and many years in sequence to improve your land the fastest while your grass productivity is maximized. This free class will be held near the end of October, and you can join the waitlist at www.rwranching.com/waitlist. It's going to be over an hour long with Q&A sessions at the end. So I want you to know that if you are already doing some type of controlled grazing, be it selective or not, you have already taken the first step to improve your land. There are just some next steps that you need to take to continue improving it year over year, faster, and at the same time maximizing your productivity. If you're interested to learn more, then attend this free class in a few weeks. Just make sure you sign up for the waitlist at www.rwranching.com/waitlist. Okay, have a great rest of the day and a blessed week. See you there. Subscribe to our podcast, Fat Cows, Fat Wallet, or go to my webpage at www.rwranching.com or on Facebook, Real World Ranching. Goodbye.